Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Noemi Ekhoff, and I am an embedded analyst for the BGA Crime Analyst in Residence program. Welcome to the Crime Analyst in Residence program webinar, Uncovering Hidden Ties, a crime analyst guide to link analysis with the Microsoft Suite, facilitated by embedded analyst Timothy T.J. Sweet. Throughout today's session, we encourage you to engage, take notes, and share your thoughts. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A. TJ will do his best to answer at the end of our session today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website, crimeanalystinresidence.com, for anyone who'd like to review it later. You can also review our recent webinars, Accelerate Your CompStat and an Introduction to Power BI Data Modeling, and how can analysts be involved in community engagement there now. Navigate to the Resources tab and then to the Webinar tab to find them. At the conclusion of the webinar, you'll receive a short evaluation form. It takes about 5 minutes to complete, and your feedback is incredibly valuable in helping us improve future sessions. We truly appreciate your input. We're excited to offer these learning opportunities and are already looking forward to our next webinar later this month. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get started. TJ Sweet is a certified anti-money laundering specialist who seeks to use his background in crime and intelligence analysis to impact the world around him positively. Sweet received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Cincinnati. After graduation, he started working as a crime analyst in the Detroit Police Department, where he assisted in the establishment of a precinct ceasefire unit aimed at addressing some of the most violent gangs and groups. While in this role, he also assisted the department in establishing initiatives involving the use of risk analysis on violent individuals. In 2020, Sweet transitioned to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, where he supported several patrol divisions and the department's crime, gun, and burglary units. He spent a lot of his time in this role working on a wide range of investigations, ranging from burglary crews to gang conflicts. In 2022, TJ served as a private sector consultant for law enforcement agencies, banks, and other private partners, helping to develop data models for the use in the AML and intelligence realm. In 2024, TJ joined CNA and the CAR team as an embedded analyst. In this role, he assists agencies across the United States increase their crime analysis capacity. Additionally, Sweet has attended numerous conferences where he has spoken on crime analysis issues ranging from link analysis to the advancement of the intelligence-led policing in the field. TJ, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Noemi. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. So everybody should be seeing an access screen. If anybody's not seeing that, just go ahead and give me a shout. And so thank you, Noemi, for that introduction. I'm not going to double back on that or revisit my background too much, but I will kind of talk a little bit about my experience with link analysis and where it's been helpful for me in my career before we jump in. So when I was in Detroit, I started in the ceasefire unit. And so we focused a lot on violent crime, especially where like groups were involved, firearms were involved. And one of the ways that we did that as analysts was through link analysis. Every time there was a shooting victim, we in the ceasefire precincts were required to do a link analysis on that victim to get an idea of who might be in their network, what impact their network might have, if any, on their being the victim of a shooting and kind of things like that. And then when I transitioned to Charlotte, at CMPD, we had a workflow involving link analysis, the link analysis tools in ArcGIS. I had a colleague who was really, really strong in SQL, and she helped me to kind of build out this process using Oracle. And so that was how we did that there. And then transitioning into CAR was kind of where this workflow was really born. In CAR, we work a lot with agencies that are smaller, and the thrust of our program is to be as free and low cost as possible. And most of the agencies that we support have Access or Power BI. And so I kind of started trying to find ways to incorporate link analysis because I found it useful. And it was expected, something that we did as part of the CAR program into those sites with tools that they already had. So maybe not ArcGIS or other link analysis programs that we had in Detroit, but maybe things like Microsoft Access and Power BI, which is how we got here. And so that's a little bit about me and kind of my relationship or exposure to link analysis. The other two things I want to touch on here before we jump into the demonstration is the first thing we have to do when we're automating anything, whether it's automating an edge list for a link analysis workflow or putting that link analysis workflow into Power BI so that we can visualize it, or if we are automating our crime stats or automating an offender workup, the biggest thing we have to have going in is, for lack of a better term, an automation plan. And so the first piece of that is, what do you want to include in your process? What do you need to include? What do you think will be beneficial to include? And then where in your data is that information? So looking in our Access database, we've got 3 tables. We've got an events table, which we know has our event number and then the event type. We've got our people table, which has the unique person ID, the first name, last name, and the date of birth of that person, right? So both of these tables have things that are important to us from a link analysis perspective. We're going to need an event number because that event is going to connect different people to one another. They're going to be connected on whatever incident or arrest or field interview it is that, for lack of a better term, brought them together. And then we're going to need people IDs and people names so that we know who actually is connected to each other. And we're going to need date of birth as one means to verify, to ensure that every person that we pull in, if we're looking at a certain subject, is the same. To see if there's any duplicates or modifications where the date of birth might look similar. We're going to need that to kind of help parse that out. And then lastly, we're going to need people events. We have the incidents, we have the people. Now we need the connection from the people to the incidents, which will be our people events table. And so in this scenario, we have those tables already. We know what those tables are, and we know what is in those tables. But what do you do if you don't know where those tables are? What is one way that you can figure this out? And again, as part of making that pre-automation plan or automation plan is figuring that out. And so number one, I could search and access through these tables, take a look through tables that might have similar names or names that match up to what I think I'm looking for. And I can see, oh, NM main's not the right table, but names main is. That's one way that I could do this. Or I could ask either my IT department or our RMS vendor if we have a data dictionary or a schema for our backend. This is one of the first things that we do when we are working with agencies. We ask either the analyst, or in some cases, we're working with agencies where the analyst is brand new, or they don't have an analyst, so there's a designated trainee. We ask them if they know where that schema is. Do they have that schema on hand? And if they don't, we go to the vendor and see if the vendor has that schema. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do as part of your automation plan is ask that question. Do I have the schema or the data dictionary for my RMS so that I can get a better idea of what these tables look like and where I can find them? And kind of as an example here, I've got one that one of our SMEs mocked up for Central Square. And so in our scenario here, if we're looking for names, events, and person events, LW main would be our events table. And we can see that table name, we can see the primary keys, and we get a few fields to kind of help guide our understanding as to what is in that table. I also can see that we've got LW names, which has the LW main, the incident ID, as a foreign key, and then has a name code, which kind of is a good hint for me to know that that's likely the name code for how somebody is connected to an event. And then lastly, if we go a little bit further down into these blue tables here, we've got NM main. which is going to be our person names table. You can see the fields that we've got in that table all point to fields that would be unique to a person or specific to a person. And that's one of the advantages that things like schemas and data dictionaries can give us, is that they can kind of help us to get a little bit of a leg up in that process of figuring out where things are in our backend or what our backend looks like, right? So instead of me having to go through and manually search names, and maybe because I typed in names, I didn't see NM main, I have that document to help guide me as to what these tables look like, how they fit together, and what I might need for automation. And so that's the first part of our automation plan is, do we have a schema? Do we know where the things that we need are and how everything fits together? The second part of this is, do we know how to verify what we're creating? Right? Because I can sit here and show you a really cool link analysis workflow or a really cool crime analysis workflow. But if I do that and all of the information is wrong and it makes no sense, then essentially what I've done is I've wasted my time. And so another question we have to ask ourselves is, what am I going to do to ensure that what I've pulled is correct? So, if you're automating crime stats, where can I search in the front end of the RMS system to make sure that the number for the time period that I did this formula on matches what I have in my Excel sheet or in my Power BI? Now, in this case, what I usually do to verify this with trainees is I'll have them pull up a case or two and make sure that all of the associates that we've generated in our workflow match what we're seeing in the front end of the system, what we're seeing in that incident report or that field interview or that arrest, just to make sure that everything is tracking. And so that's kind of our two-step automation plan, automation game plan that we need as we're getting ready to start this. But I know that y'all didn't come here to see schemas and hear about schemas and hear about data verification. So let's go ahead and dive into what this workflow looks like. And so if you come down through my access, you see that I've got two macros. One is link analysis 1, one is link analysis 2. Whenever I'm doing queries and macros and making tables, I just like to name everything sequentially by what that is doing and what order it is in that process. That's mainly because I'm not super creative and I try my best not to get lost in these things, especially if I'm coming back to a car site for the first time in 4 weeks and maybe we've been working on other things, so we haven't been hitting link analysis. That just helps me get an idea and the analyst and the training recipient get an idea of what needs to run in what order and how things fit together. And so right now you can see that I've got a table of names that first name starts with A, last name starts with C. And so in our scenario that we're going to run with today, I'm an analyst for the Detroit Police Department like I used to be. We're taking a time machine. And I'm being asked to do a social network analysis or a link analysis on a shooting victim named Tybee Kramer. And table 1 is our subject candidate table. And as you can see, Tybee Kramer is nowhere to be found in that table. So I'm going to X out of this. I'm going to come down here to link analysis 1, double click that, and I'm going to input first name, but I'm going to input a partial with a wildcard. So I want every first name that starts with T. Same workflow for input last name. Since we know our last name's Kramer, I'm going to go with input last name that starts with a C. And if you recall, table 1 was the table that I initially showed you. But now, table 1, instead of having all of those other names that started with an A and first name started with an A, last name started with a C, that table was recreated just with names that matched what I had input in those parameters. Starts with a T, first name, last name starts with a C. And so I have my candidates, and I can see that here, the only one that really looks like it's possibly Tybee Kramer is person 57, Tybee Kramer. So I'm going to hit this include checkbox, and I'm going to save here. And essentially what I did with this first macro is I enabled the selection of a subject name or subject names factoring in duplicates, right? Because one of the things we have to address in link analysis is duplicate names and ensuring that we're handling all the duplicate information, right? In a perfect world, there wouldn't be any duplicates. Every name record ties back to one person. There's no aliases. Everything's great. But as I'm sure a lot of us know on this call, there are always duplicates. I was supporting an agency earlier this year, and they mentioned to me that they had 600,000 duplicates. And so one of the things that we have to do is figure out how to factor those duplicates into our process. And this is important, not just from a buy-in perspective and an accuracy perspective, but this is also important from an officer safety perspective, right? Let's say I checked this Tybee Kramer, and there was another Tybee Kramer who I didn't check that had a date of birth of October 19th, 1997, and that record was connected to an officer-involved shooting or a vehicle pursuit. If I don't pull that in and find a way to factor that duplicate in, I run the risk of missing really critical information for my officers who might go and knock on Tybee Kramer's door or pull him over if they see him driving around. And so that's why it's important to factor that process of accounting for duplicates into the beginning of this workflow. And so I think I already hit save, but I'm just going to hit it again, just because if we don't hit save, then there will be no includes and we won't be able to bring anything back. So I'm going to X out of this table, and we're going to go into design view of this macro to get an idea of what was actually happening when we ran that. And so for those of you who maybe are a little bit newer to Excel or newer to macros, macros are a way of putting together a bunch of different queries or other actions and allowing them to kind of run together with the click of a button. When you run the macro, all those queries and actions in that macro run until either the macro is complete or there's an error. And so what this macro did was three things. Number one, it ran a delete query, which wiped out everything in table one. It then ran a target select query, which replaced everything in table one with names that matched whatever parameters I input. And then it opened table one so that I could select possible matches. But before all of that, it was also set to not include any of the warnings. So for instance, if I double-click this delete query, I get this warning that says, hey, you're about to run a delete query, and that delete query is going to mess up everything. It's going to delete everything in your table. Do you want to do that? And when I added set warnings and turned set warnings on to no, I overrode those warning messages. Because in this case, I've put together this macro. I know all of the queries work. I know the macro works. So I don't want to be bothered by 3 different warnings every single time that something runs. But now what I do say to every analyst that I work with as we're building this out, and what I will say to you all here as you're thinking through building this out, is if you're just starting, number one, I would recommend running queries one by one before putting them in a macro to make sure that things work and make sure they would look right. And then number two, when you first run that macro, keep the warnings on just so you understand what is happening and you know if something looks off. But then once you figure that out, once everything looks good and is squared away, that's when I would recommend putting set warnings on and then setting those warnings to no, setting warnings on to no. So that's the first item in this macro. Second item in this macro is an open query. And so this runs whatever query is the query name here, which in our case is delete query. So we're going to open this up in design view so we can see what it does. And this one's pretty simple. All it really does is it takes whatever is in table one, our subject table, it selects all of those records, and since this query type is delete, it wipes that table out. So we're keeping the underlying table structure. We're not deleting the table itself. We're just deleting everything that's inside of the table so that we can replace it with our new subject. And the reason this is useful is because if we're running this and trying to think through how to store these tables, we don't want a million tables for a million different subjects. We want to get the subject information we need, bring that into Power BI, and have a way to go ahead and clear that table when we're ready for a new subject. And that's what our delete query helps us do. So that's our delete query. And then our next query was our target select query. So we're going to go ahead and open that in design view. And one thing that you'll see here is that both of these queries have different symbols next to them, and they're kind of grouped in the query section. And that is just because they're different types of queries. So this kind of designates that delete query is a delete, essentially is what it says it is. It's a delete query. But then our target select query has this green plus, which designates it as an append query. So what this query does is it takes these fields and it appends them to table 1. So in our last query, we emptied out table 1. The target select query fills table 1 with new information. And so we've got our fields, and then we've got where everything appends to. The big thing here to check out, though, is we've got some criteria. So if you recall, when we ran that macro, when I double-clicked link analysis 1, it asked me to input a first name and input a last name. That's what these brackets are for. What I'm saying here is, for that table you just wiped, I want you to replace the blank table with all of the same fields that we've been using, but I want the first name to be like whatever I put into that parameter. So in this case, since I was running it on Tybee Kramer, I want that to be like the letter T and a wildcard. Everything that comes after the first name that starts with a T. And then for last name, same deal. I want everything like whatever I input for last name, which in our workflow was all last names that start with a C. And then so that's what that does. And then the last piece of this macro was opening a table. And that table was table 1, our subject candidate table. And if you were eagle-eyed, you might have noticed something. You might have noticed that we didn't have an include in our original, in any of our queries. We had a person ID, we had the first and last names, we had the date of birth, and we brought together a full name, but we didn't quite have this include. And so what I did here was, if we open this table in design view, I added a field called include, and the data type for include is yes or no. And so we're going to incorporate that a little bit later into our workflow to make sure that we're pulling only items for our person of interest, the person who we are including. So the way this field works is if the checkbox is blank, we're not including that person. If we've got a check, that means that's the person or people that we are including. And so this is great and all. What we have right now is a way to ensure that we can continue to make selections for our subject and keep those results all in one table. So I'm not making a million different tables for a million different subjects. It all goes in the same place. Old subjects and old subject candidates are deleted when I don't need them. And I can input a first and last name to match the new subject candidates when I'm going to use this workflow again. That's great and all, but that doesn't quite give us an edge list. And so what we need to do to get that is we need to come down here and run link analysis 2. And so I double click this. And now we've got, as you can see, we've got Tybee Kramer. We've got his cases and we've got his associates. But you'll also see that we've got a bunch of other names down here, right? If you remember, if we go back up here, Chase Sampson was one of Tybee Kramer's associates. And so now we've got him as the subject and his associates. And so essentially what we've built out here is an edge list to the second degree. And what that means in layman's terms is we've got all of Tybee Kramer's associates, the people directly connected to him to the first degree, but then we've got the people who might not be directly connected to Tybee Kramer, but they're connected to his associates. And the reason that this is important is because edge list to the second degree give us the potential to find insights on people we may not already know are connected to our subject. Right? One of the limitations of law enforcement data within the context of link analysis is that we've only got people who have been documented in an incident together. They're going to be in the first degree if they've been caught, right? So let's say Caitlin, Charlie, and I, we're all doing burglaries together. And we do a burglary, the police show up. Caitlin and I, we're a little bit slow, we're a little bit sluggish. We unfortunately get caught at the scene. But Charlie, he's been doing his conditioning, he's been doing his HIIT workouts. He gets away. If we ran a link analysis to the first degree for either me or for Caitlin, Charlie would not be on that network because he didn't get caught in that case. But me and Caitlin would be connected to each other. But what if Charlie is on social media posting all the time with me or with Caitlin, right? Maybe he knows one of us really well. Maybe we run the link analysis on Caitlin. She's directly connected to me, and Charlie is directly connected to me. If we run that to the first degree for Caitlin, we might miss that. But if we run it to the second degree, I as an analyst might recognize Charlie's name. And if I know him well enough to know that he's also involved in burglaries, that might pique my interest. And if I go and look on his social media, I might see that him and Caitlin know each other more than what our records might be showing as of right now. And that's something that adds value for me as an analyst and that I can take to other members of my team. And so that's why it's important to bring these out to the second degree, because we can find those people who are on a network that are closer to our subject than maybe we realize. And before I jump into the macro, one other thing I will say here is that I'm not doing all that to say that if you see somebody's name on a second degree, you should, shout to the rooftops that they're connected to your initial subject. What I'm mainly suggesting is that if you see somebody's name that is of interest to you or of relevance to the second degree, maybe you see a burglary guy when you did a link analysis on a burglary guy, that might be something for you to do a little bit of due diligence on. Maybe check some narratives and see if they've ever been at the same scene somewhere. Or do some social media digging and see if you see that they actually know each other better than we think. Or maybe they showed up somewhere in a way that will surprise us. And so that's the value of doing this to the second degree. And this is what that table can look like and what we're going to bring into Power BI. But what exactly did we do here? How exactly does this work? So to answer that question, we're going to come down here to link analysis 2. And instead of running it, just like we did with link analysis 1, we're going to open it in design view. And as you can see, this macro is a little bit bigger, a little bit busier than the other one that we looked at. But by and large, it's the same logic. We're starting by setting our warnings to off or to no, because we've tested this, we've ran this, we've put this together, and we know that it works. So we can go ahead and turn those warnings off. I don't need to see a million additions of, you're going to make a new table or you're going to delete this table. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And then the first thing I'm going to do is open my link chart 1 query. And so what these queries are going to do is they're going to answer a series of questions, right? Because essentially when we're building these queries for a link analysis, and when we're thinking through link analysis, we're asking a series of questions to better understand what's going on with our subject and the people around him. And so this first question that we're going to ask is specific to our subject. And that question is, what incidents is Tybee Kramer involved in? For our purposes, we know that he's involved in at least one shooting. That's why we did this link analysis on him. But is that a one-off lone wolf type thing where he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is there more to this that we need to dig into? And so to do that, I'm going to take my table 1, my subject candidates table, and I'm going to join that to people events, or if you remember our SunGuard document or our SunGuard diagram from earlier, our LW names table. And I'm going to join those on the person ID. And in our resulting table, I'm going to bring in all of the information from table 1. And I'm going to add a filter for include to be yes. Right? I talked about this a little bit earlier. Include being yes is where we check somebody off. So when I'm saying include is yes, I'm saying I want all of the incidents connected to people, but the only person that I'm interested in is Tybee Kramer. Right? This is where we narrow our question down from what incidents are people involved in to what incidents is Tybee Kramer involved in. And then from my people events table, I'm going to bring in the report number because I want that. And then I'm also going to bring in the role to get an idea of what exactly is going on here. And this query, unlike the other options that you've seen, is a make table query. So instead of deleting from an existing table or adding to an existing table, we're going to create a new table and populate that with information from this query. And whenever we run this query, we're overwriting link analysis 1 with the new answer to this question. But in this instance, the query, our link chart 1 query here, asks what incidents is Tybee Kramer involved in. Link analysis 1, again, as you can see, I'm very creative and very original when it comes to my names. Link analysis 1 is going to contain that answer. And so what we can see here is that Tybee Kramer has been involved in a few other cases outside of this shooting, but he himself is not super busy, right? It looks like he's been the victim in 3 other cases or 2 other cases in addition to our shooting, and then he's been the involved other in another one, but not a ton of stuff per se going on his end. And so that's the answer to our first question. We now know what incidents that Tybee Kramer is involved in. So the next thing we need to ask is what incidents are, or who else is associated to those incidents? We know that Tybee Kramer is connected to 4 incidents. The next thing we want to know is who else is involved in those? Is Tybee Kramer a lone wolf who just gets victimized by himself? Or is there something going on here? And so to do this, we've got our same relationship from last time with a slight modification. So now we've got our new link analysis 1 table. And, or I'm sorry, not quite the same relationship. We're building a new query to help us answer that question. And so to start, we've got our link analysis 1 table, which was the table that we created using our last query, our table of incidents connected to Tybee Kramer. And we're joining that to people events, or thinking back to our diagram, LW names on the report number. And we're also joining LW names to people, or thinking back to our diagram, NM main, on the person ID. And so we're using this join to get all of the associates connected to Tybee Kramer's cases. And we're pulling everything in from link analysis 1, and then we're pulling the person ID, the first and last name, the date of birth, and then we're creating a new full name field, and we're calling it vertex 2 full name. You could call it associate full name, where all we're really doing here is just concatenating the first name and the last name. But we've also added a criteria here. We had that same full name on link analysis 1, and every single time it was Tybee Kramer because he was our subject. But now we add a criteria that says we want the full name of our vertex 2, of our associates, to not equal the full name from link analysis 1. And so what we're doing here is we're ensuring that we're only bringing back the associates. We don't want to bring in Tybee Kramer. We've already brought in Tybee Kramer. We already know what he has going on. We want a way to bring in his associates. And so that's what this logic does. And then just like link chart 1, link chart 2 is also a make table query. So we're taking the answer to our question, who is Tybee Kramer associated to? And we're putting that answer in a table, which, this will shock you, I've named link analysis 2. And if you remember correctly, and if you've been paying attention to this point, you might be thinking, TJ, there's something interesting here. It seems like you might have forgotten how to count. Because you're saying the final table is link analysis 2, and yet you've got 4 other queries there. So the math isn't quite mathing. And the reason for that is because we want to store the completed edge list all in one table. So right now, with link chart 2 and link analysis 2, as they are, with no queries 3 and 4, we would have an edge list to the first degree. We've already answered what offenses Tybee Kramer has been involved in, and we've already answered who else is connected to those offenses. And that would result in a first degree network, which, if we look at specifically Tybee Kramer here at the top, we can see that there are a number of people connected to him. He's not quite a lone wolf. There are quite a few people for 4 cases. This could be a decent first degree network. But again, as we kind of touched on when we first looked at this table, there's more opportunities for insights when we take it just a little bit further. And so that's what we're going to do. So right now we built out this network a little bit. And the next thing we need to do is we need to shift our focus to Tybee Kramer's associates. And to do that, to start that process, we're going to ask the same question that we asked about Tybee Kramer. We're just going to ask it about his associates. And that question is, what incidents are Tybee Kramer's associates involved in? And to do that, we're going to start with link analysis 2, which is going to be our completed edge list. We haven't quite gotten there yet. We're going to join from our associate person ID, right? We've got link analysis 1 person ID, which we know is Tybee Kramer's ID. But because we're looking specifically at the associates, we want the people underscore person ID, the person ID that we brought in to link analysis 2 from the people table. And so we're going to connect that ID, the ID of the associate, to people events or LW names, referring back to our diagram, on the person ID. And then from people event to events, or referring back to the diagram, LW names to NM main, we're going to link on the incident number. And so again, we're looking specifically at, because we're using people person ID, we're looking specifically at the associates, Tybee Kramer's associates. And we're asking, what incidents have they been involved in? Are they all just a bunch of quiet people? Or is there something more deep, or something a little bit deeper going on here? And so we're bringing in pretty much all of our fields with report number coming in from, we're bringing in all of our fields from link analysis 2, and then we're adding our report number from people events to get an idea of what those case numbers look like. How many are there? Where is that additional involvement? And this is also a make table query. And this goes to link analysis 3. And again, kind of like I said at the beginning, this is really nice because if I'm coming in here for the first time in a little bit to help troubleshoot something, or if I'm the analyst, I can look into the macros, see the sequential order of link chart 1, link chart 2, link chart 3, and then see that same sequential order of my tables and get an idea of how the order of things works. I just name tables like this because it's easier for me to have an idea of what exactly is going on in this workflow and where exactly I'm at in this workflow. And so now our answer to what cases are Tybee Kramer's associates involved in is found in link analysis 3. And as we can see, looks like a lot of these folks have some stuff going on, a little bit of busyness going on here on our network. So there is something here worth exploring. This isn't just a one-off thing where Tybee Kramer was, wrong place, wrong time. There is something that we could look into here. And so that's link analysis 3. The final step, of course, is to ask the question, who else is associated to these incidents? We know what incidents that Tybee Kramer's associates are involved in. The final question we're asking is there anybody else associated to these incidents? And again, we're essentially just asking the same questions we asked about Tybee Kramer, and we're broadening those questions to include his associates now. And so if we go to link chart 4, already, like I said earlier, you'll see that link chart 4 is not grouped with link charts 1 through 3. And that's because this organizes by query type, and these are different query types. So we come up here to link chart 4, and now we've got link analysis 3. So we've got our folks that are associates of Tybee Kramer. We've got all their incidents, and we're joining on those report numbers to people events or LW names, and we're joining on the report number field. And then we're joining back from people events to people on the person ID because we're trying to bring in those associates. And so we're bringing in our fields. And just like I did last time, I've got the same criteria here. In this instance, I did it on person ID in link chart 4. It's kind of the same principle or logic that I did in link chart 2 of I don't want the person ID for the people I've already brought in. I don't want the person ID for Tybee Kramer's associates. I've already factored them in. I've already included them. So I want all the person IDs on these cases that are not Tybee Kramer's associates. I already know who they are. I've already got information on them. I want information on other people connected to these cases. It just avoids duplication. It avoids all that overload. And the only other difference you'll see here is that the other query designs did not have this append to. And that is because this query is an append query. This is how we're bringing everything together. Instead of creating a new link chart 4 query and having the first degree network in one place and the second degree network in another, we're putting all of that in link chart 2. And the reason we're doing that is because we want this edge list to be all in one place. You know, I could think through and work through how to bring all of this together using Power BI, but it's much easier and it's a much more concise workflow for us if we put it all together in Access and then bring the complete edge list into Power BI to work with. And so that's what I do here. I append this to link chart 2. And if I delete both this and the macro and open up link chart 2, or link analysis 2, I'm sorry, that is where I get my edge list to the second degree. So we have the edge list to the first degree here, but then everything below it is our edge list to the second degree. We've appended that new information onto link analysis 2 to have this table all in one centralized spot. And so that's the extent of our Microsoft Access work. What we've done here right now is we've created 2 macros, the first of which creates a process that allows us to select a new target and keep all of our candidate information in one table. When we have a candidate we don't need anymore and we're replacing it with a new one, we run link analysis 1, wipe table 1, and replace it with whichever subject names I'm now interested in. And then after that, we run link analysis 2, which generates our edge list, right? It asks all of those questions that we just went over in about 20-ish minutes or so. And it puts all of the answers, it builds this up and puts that finalized edge list into link analysis 2. And so now with 2 clicks of a button, we've generated an edge list and we are ready to go into Power BI. And so right now I need to clear this real quick, but this is what this can look like. Let me just unclear my filter. And so if we put on Tybee Kramer and don't hit all my dots, there we go. If we unclear the filter now, we get this big jumbled monstrosity of horror, right? That would be useful to a grand total of nobody. And what this is right now is a challenge that we run into with second degree networks, right? We had about 200 rows in that data set that we pulled in from Power BI. And So if we just generate that and don't do anything with it, this is going to be absolutely useless and make sense to nobody, including us. And so one of the nice things about Power BI is we can leverage things like slicers and other visuals to figure out who the problem folks are, narrow this down and look at specific people on the network or specific crime types on the network and address this problem and make this a lot more digestible. So for example, if I click down to Tybee Kramer, instead of having a big monstrosity of horror, I now have a directed graph for Tybee Kramer. I have a link analysis for Tybee Kramer. This bar chart is the average incident severity per person. So who's been involved in more serious incidents than others. And then this bar chart is just the count of report numbers by individuals connected to Tybee Kramer. So some basic ways that I can help my decision makers, guide target prioritization. Do we want to focus on the folks that have more violent involvement with Tybee Kramer? Or do we want to focus on the people who have more involvement in general with Tybee Kramer? And to use this visual, to add this visual, I've used what is called the force-directed graph. And so this is a visual that is one that you can get from Power BI or get imported into Power BI. So if I come here, I can either get a visual or I can import a visual. And there's a bunch of other visuals, as you can see, that I can import, right? In addition to things like a force-directed graph, I could bring in Icon Map Pro or Zebra BI tables. Just a lot of things that I can do. But if I come to the right and search force-directed graph, this visual by Microsoft Corporation is what I imported. These are free visuals that are designed to supplement things that are already in Power BI. So if you're working in Power BI and you've got all those out of the box visuals, but there's something you're trying to do that those visuals just don't cut it for, maybe look up some force-directed graph, or not just force-directed graph, but look up some other visuals and see if there's anything that, like an org chart or a different type of graph, that might be more beneficial for you in solving your problems. But this is how you find that, is just by clicking these three dots and then clicking get more visuals and then searching in the top right. And so what I've done here is my source is my full name. Vertex 2 or my target is the associate full name. I'm weighing these, so the bigger circles are the ones that have more report numbers. They're the ones that have what is called a higher degree of centrality. They're more important because they have more going on in the network. And then my link type is incident type. So all this is link type is what is coloring these arrows. So different offenses are different colors. And one thing I can do to help with this is I've added a slicer for incident type. So say we're looking at Tybee Kramer and I'm really interested in auto thefts. He's come up in a series of auto thefts. He's got none, but if I look up LFAs, he has a bunch of people that he's involved in LFAs with. And if I'm an analyst and I want to maybe start building this out more and seeing who else could be connected to Tybee Kramer or some of these names, I could add to my target select. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this filter. But let's say I saw that maybe Fanny Sorby, I knew that she was an LFA person. I want to see if there are any common connections from her to Tybee Kramer. I can control click, and there her name is. And you'll also see that something kind of cool happened. When I had just Tybee Kramer here, right, the target was Tybee Kramer's name. But the minute that I added multiple selections, the target became multiple selected people. And I did that by just creating a dynamic title using Power BI. Again, using Power BI's capabilities to help me kind of enrich this and make this easier and more digestible for myself as an analyst, as well as other people who I might share this dashboard with and let them take a look. And so looking at this, I can see that Fanny Sorby and Tybee Kramer have a common connection in Thana Wallich. And that connection looks like it was through LFAs, right? And so this is one value here of link analysis, is I can get an idea of who all is connected to who, what else is going on in that network by building this out using things like slicers and getting an idea piece by piece of what is going on with different facets, different people, and different categories on this network, right?
Hey,
We're able to
TJ.
use like, I'm sorry, go ahead, Caitlin.
Sorry, we have a raised hand. John Markovic has a question.
Yeah.
John, if you're able to, you can come off. I should be able to get you off of mute.
It looks like you're not muted anymore.
I cannot hear you, John. John, there might be some issue.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you
Yes.
now.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I just must have hit the raise hand by accident.
Oh, okay. No
I
problem.
apologize about disrupting. Yeah.
No problem.
No worries at all. But then to do the target selected, if I click on this slicer, I can see what the field is. And clicking on that shows the DAX that I use. So essentially all I did here was created two variables, names and count selected. And I said if the count selected in the slicer is 1, then I want to concatenate the text target and whichever person's name that was. But if it returns more than one person, then I want it to say target multiple selected so that people know that there are more than one targets and this isn't looking specifically at a certain person. And so this is essentially what this can look like in Power BI. This is one way to visualize networks in Power BI. And this is one way using these slicers, using these parameters to kind of solve that second degree network problem of having so many names that it's not useful. You know, being able to symbolize and hone in on certain parts of the network. If I even come here and specifically look at larceny from auto, this gets much more concise, and I can see that there are a few mutual connections on larceny from autos that Tybee Kramer and Fannie Sorby have. But this is what this can look like. There are other ways to do link analysis in Power BI and other ways to visualize link analysis in general, you know, using Node Excel or Analyst Notebook. But I really wanted to focus on what this can look like using the Microsoft Suite, building out this automated edge list process, using Microsoft Access, and then importing that information into Power BI, where if I come down to model view, you can see I've got my link analysis to table, and then I just added a sheet of incidents. If I wanted to refresh this table, if I go to the 3 dots, I can hit refresh data, that refreshes it. And then if I wanted to bring in this data fresh, I would click get data. We can see in our options that there's not an access there. So we just go to more, and then I would click on Access Database and go from there. But that's what this all can look like, leveraging both Microsoft Access and Power BI. I hope that this was educational and informative for you all, and I hope that it inspires you to think through how you can do this in your context. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
TJ, are you able to, you should be able to see the Q&A. If not, I can read the questions out to you.
Yes, TJ, I see a question here regarding any additional Power BI visualizations that you would recommend downloading for crime analysis purposes that are not one of the default included visualizations.
Yes, I have downloaded. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones I've used, but I have used some of like the more dynamic, slicer options that they have. Let me just jump in and get more visuals here and see if I can jog my memory. I think I've used some of the Zebra BI tables that were here at the top. Sorry, I moved a little bit too fast. The Zebra BI tables, which just allows for some more interactivity. And then I can't scroll that way. And then Sankey charts occasionally can be useful. I would say something like a text search slicer could be interesting if you have narratives and maybe you're looking for a certain word or category, like you're looking for like narratives that say gun in a link analysis or gun in a report. Things like a text search slicer could be really useful. There are also some other ones on here for filtering, like the info river super filter, which lets you filter just on more options than what you would be given in the regular slicers. One that is really cool, and I'll kind of be open and honest and say that I have explored doing link analysis in this, but I've just had a little bit of a learning curve with it, is Deneb. So Deneb is an additional visual in Power BI that you can bring in, and it allows you to use Vega or Vega-like language, which is kind of like very similar. It kind of incorporates like JSON, JavaScript online notation, to create more custom visuals. So in that one, you are kind of able to program how you want your visuals to look, how big you want things to be, what color you want them to be. It just gives you a lot more configurability. So Deneb was one that I've played around a little bit with. I just wasn't able to get the link analysis piece of it quite where I wanted it. But that is an alternative that I've explored for doing link analysis or for doing other things in Power BI.
Thank you. And we just have a couple other questions. Are you able to adjust things such as the thickness of the edge or the size of the node to account for different values and attributes? For example, thicker lines for more mutual incident connections?
Yeah, so you can put, let me click on that so I can actually have the visuals things in here. You can put, I don't have a ton of great examples in this data, but you could use different fields or link types different fields as your weight. So in this one, I just use the count of report number, but because we're able to leverage things like DAX in Power BI, if you wanted to use different things like that for thickness or count of connections, those are things that you could either incorporate using Microsoft Access or that you could incorporate using DAX in Power BI.
Thank you. And the final question that I see here is, can you do this with addresses? Someone's department wants to include information from ShotSpotter, and the only thing they can see being the connector is the address.
Yes, you could do a process like this with addresses. There are other link analysis workflows that do use addresses, that instead of connecting people on a case, yeah, they connect them on the address and say, hey, these people live here. That is something that I believe that we explored in Charlotte. I think I did play around with that in our link analysis for ArcGIS workflow, because like another thing that you can do, even going off of addresses with the link analysis piece there, is you can bring in coordinates and put those things on a map and see, how close might people's addresses be to the crimes that they commit. How close might people's kind of sphere of influence be to those addresses that connect them? But that's kind of a bit of a long answer, a bit of a tangent. The short answer is that yes, those are things that you can do using link analysis.
Perfect. I believe that concludes our questions. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and a very special thank you to TJ for sharing his time and expertise with us today. We hope you found this session helpful. Don't forget to complete the short evaluation form. We truly value your feedback. That will be sent out momentarily. The recording will be up on our website by the end of the week, and a link to the website will be sent out along with the evaluation form. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which will be on September 17th, with Senior Police Analyst Mike Winslow from the Scottsdale, Arizona Police Department on Wonderful World of Workups, your guide to becoming a professional creeper. Until then, take care and thank you again for your time.
Have a good one, y'all.